Good evening. We are ready to start the show. Tales of mystery and suspense. Ooh. And for our first teller, we have Kim Whitcomb, who's sweet but carries the secret of suspense with a tale of the boo hag. Ooh. Good evening. They say you should not speak of the devil, lest you yearn to hear the flap of his wings. But you paid for this, so here we go. When she walked by his table, he was mesmerized. Her long black hair swayed with the move of her hips. And when she turned and looked at him with eyes as green as sea glass, freshly washed ashore, he knew that he had to have her. He bought a little chocolate box-sized house on the edge of town and set up a small farm. And within 3 months of courting, they were married. She was thrilled. He was kind and hardworking. He was happy beyond belief. She was stunning. An hourglass figure, dark hair, green eyes, porcelain skin, soft voice, full lips. My wife is so beautiful, he would tell people. She is so beautiful. On their wedding night, when she moved in, she had very little. She had no family, few belongings. She put away her clothing in their bedroom and then began to pull her spinning wheel into the house with his help. He said, okay, so we have 2 bedrooms and it's gonna be a little while till we have a child, so let's put your spinning wheel in the spare bedroom. And she said, oh, I bring so little into this union, please, can I have it on my side of the bed? It's the one thing that I have had with me for a long time. Can you just, please? And he looked at her and thought, oh, my wife. So beautiful. Absolutely. Whatever you want. Well, that night they had a good meal. He helped her clean up, and then he went and got ready for bed. He pulled down the covers, looked at her, smacked the mattress, and said, come, my wife. I want to lay with you. I want to hold you. And she said, well, this is all so new to me. I've never obviously had a husband. I've not even had a family. And she said, this is my first night in our home. She said, it's just so foreign to me. She said, how about tonight? I sing you to sleep. And I promise tomorrow night you can hold me. Okay, he said. She patted around the bed and pulled the blanket up over his chest, gave him a kiss on the forehead as she pulled away the scent of lavender, filled the air. And the man closed his eyes and she began to sing. Eyes close, night falls, stars blink a warning, moon glows on silent night, no one knows my wanting. The next morning he awoke, he was on his side and he stretched and he thought, oh, my wife. He turned to greet her and to say good morning, and when he did, he could not believe what he saw. She was curled up in a fetal position, clawed fingers and balls, tight fists, throbbing veins, her hair wet and sticky, sticking to her skin, eyes pus-filled, red-rimmed. And he looked at her and he said, my wife, what's wrong? And she goes, nothing. And he said, something is wrong. She said, nothing is wrong. Go to work. They say if you laugh, you recognize. And he said, but my wife, something has to be wrong. If you just tell me, I'll fix it. She goes, nothing is wrong. Go to work. Well, the man didn't know what to do, so he obeyed and he slid out of bed, put on his clothing, and he went to work, and he fretted all day, and he couldn't wait till the day was over at the mill. And when he headed home down that straight road to his house, there she was in the doorway, filling the doorway, thick raven hair falling over her shoulders, green, bright eyes and a smile, her arms wide, and he fell into her arms and he said, "Oh, my wife, I'm so glad that you're okay." She said, "Of course I'm okay." And that night they had dinner. It was good conversation, laughter. They cleaned up. He went to bed, pulled the covers down, touched the bed and said, "My wife, tonight, let me hold you." And she said, "Well." See, now no one will laugh. She said, "I still don't feel comfortable." She said, "How about just one more night?" "Okay," he said. She patted around the bed, kissed him on the forehead, and he looked at her face, the porcelain skin, the eyes, the lips, and he said, "My wife is so beautiful." And he said, "Sing to me," and she did. Eyes close, night falls, stars blink a warning, moon glows on silent night, no one knows my wanting. The next morning the man woke up and he reached out before he turned and he felt it, the damp, wet bed filled with her sweat, and as he glanced over, he saw her laying there, curled up in a fetal position, balled fists with throbbing veins, hair sticking to her skin, eyes pus-filled, red-rimmed, and he said, "My wife, tell me what is wrong and I will fix it. I will go to the ends of the earth to fix this." And she said, "Nothing is wrong. Go to bed. Work. Go to work." They give us too much wine here. And so the man slid out of bed, got dressed, and he went to work. 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights. And on the 5th day, when he went to the mill to work, he went to his boss and he said, "Look, you know I just got married." And his boss is like, "Oh, yeah. Your wife is beautiful." He said, "I know, and she's sick, and I don't know what's wrong." And he said, "I need to try and fix it today. Please, can I leave work?" And his boss said, "Absolutely." He said, "Get it taken care of." And the man left, but instead of going to the doctors, he went to the edge of town because he knew deep inside that this went beyond the flesh. And he had heard about it in stories his whole life since he was a small child. But he'd never been there. And so he did what he had heard in the stories and walked to the edge of town, off to the right, till he found a dirt path, and there was a pile of rocks marking the spot where you turn into the woods. And he turned to the woods, and he walked till it became tangled. And then he walked until it became thick. And then he walked until it became dark. And then there it was, the small house of the conjure woman. He walked up and he knocked on the door. And the door opened and she said, "Hello." "You have a story on you. I see it's weight. Come in. I want to hear." And the man went in. She pulled out a chair. He sat down. She made a warm drink. He sipped and she said, "Tell me your story. Tell me your story." And he said, "It's my wife." He said, "I married a beautiful woman, and every morning when I wake up, she's curled up in a ball. She's sweating, sticky, pus-filled eyes." And he said, "Something is wrong." She speaks in a voice that is many demons. "Go, go," she says, "and I don't know what to do." And she goes, "Oh, you've married a boo-hag." He said, "What?" She said, "You've married a boo-hag in that beautiful skin that you love." "It's not hers, it's borrowed. She spins it off. It's borrowed skin." And he said, "You are crazy." He said, "My wife is beautiful, borrowed skin." He said, I should have never came here." And he pushed the table. The chair fell down. He went to walk out the door and she grabbed his arm with a strength that he could not believe. She pulled him back and she said, "Listen, tonight before she sings to you, put cotton in your ears. And when you know she's done, pull it out and listen. And then look and tell me what you see." The man took off through the woods. He went home. He went down the street towards his house, his heart pounding in his chest. Relief flooded over him. There was his wife in the doorway, filling the frame, long dark hair, green, joyful eyes, arms open, and he fell into them. And he said, "My wife, I'm so glad you're okay." And in his mind, he was saying, "Boo hag, borrowed skin, spinning off skin. The woman is crazy. My wife." He buried his face into her lavender-scented hair. And as he kissed her at that spot that she loved so much, right about here, he noticed that the ear was a little lower than it had been before. He went in and they ate, and he didn't know what to think. It can't be possible. And he looked up and saw that the knuckles and the wrinkles above them had shifted back. It can't be, he said. That night when they went to bed, he said, "I'm tired. Just sing to me." And he had put cotton in his ears, and she came and she sang to him. And when he knew the song was over, he moved on the bed and popped out the cotton and listened. He heard her pad across the bedroom. He heard her weight on the spinning wheel. And then he heard a sound he'd never heard before. And he looked through one slitted eye and saw his wife, completely disrobed, sitting on the spinning wheel, arm outstretched, pink, glistening skin coming off in threads, up her arm, down her face and cheek, all the way down to the tips of her toes, and then she stood up. Pulsating muscle, hair sticking to her back. She walked to the window, threw it open, got up into the windowsill, and shot into the night. The man laid there. He couldn't believe it. He got out of bed, he got dressed, he ran out of the little town to the edge, turned at the rocks, went to the house, knocked on the door. The door opened and she said, "I told you so." He said, "I don't know what to do." And she said, "Do you have woodworking tools?" He said, "Of course I do, I am a man." He said, "You need woodworking tools and blue paint. Paint all the window sashes and nail them shut. But one of them, nail it so it's open just enough, and then rough up the wood so that it rips at her muscles. And then put salt into the skin and don't let her get in it before the sun comes up. Don't let her get in it." "And then come back and tell me what you see." The man ran home. He went into the kitchen. He got salt. He went upstairs. He poured it into the skin that was laying on the floor in a pink pile. He put a spoon in and he stirred. He dropped the spoon, kicked it under the bed. He went out to the shed. He got the woodworking tools, the paint. He did exactly as she had asked. And then he went upstairs, got into bed, breathing heavy, put the covers over, and he waited. And he heard her. He heard her against the side of the house, trying to get in, screaming. Against the side of the house like raw meat on butcher block. He heard her hitting the side of the house trying to get in, and then he heard her screaming as she came through the window with the jagged wood. He heard her with a thud hit the floor as she entered the house, and then he heard her coming towards the bedroom, and then whoosh across the top of the bed over him. He felt the heat from her body. She landed with a thud on the side of the bed, and when he looked at her, there she was, nothing but muscle, sticky hair sticking to her sinewy muscle. She was looking at him with those green eyes filled with hate as she tried to pull the skin back onto her body. The salt got into the wounds, and she screamed, "Ah!" She had it halfway up when the pink sun hit the sleepy mountains, and light came through the window and landed on her before the skin was on, and she was gone. And crepe paper skin fluttered to the floor, and she was no longer there. The man got out of bed and looked at what was left of his wife. He got a broom and a dustpan, jimmied the window open, and he sent her back to wherever she came from. He sold the house, bought a little farmette on the other side of town, said she left, and everyone said she was too beautiful for him. And he said, "I'll never get married again," but never say never, because 2 years later, a baker moved to town, and he had an assistant, a stocky woman with tree trunk legs, thick hair and a tight bun on her head, a hard worker, and the man said, "Now there's a woman for me." And so he courted her, they got married, and she moved in. And they had a child. And the child was old enough, just a few weeks, to be in the other bedroom by itself. And they had laid down together to go to sleep, and the baby started to cry, and he said, "I'll get the baby." And she said, "No, I'll do it. You have to go to work tomorrow." And he pushed into his pillow with great joy, and he smiled, "My wife, my child." And he listened to her as she padded out of the bedroom. She picked up the baby. Shh. Eyes closed. Night falls. Stars blink. A warning. Shh. Moon glows on silent night. No one knows my wanting. And now, the man who has come to save your souls, Reverend Robert Jones.
That was scary. Well, you know, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And as I'm here for the first time at the Ojai Storytelling Festival, enjoying my brothers and my sisters on this Halloween Eve, I want to tell you something that actually happened to me. It was around Halloween season in the city of Ojai, California. I flew into Santa Barbara, was picked up by a beloved leader, Brian, big man. And he drove us in, and as he drove us in, he told us of this beautiful city called Ojai, and it's like, yeah. And he said, "You guys are going to be staying in different places, and you will be in a cottage that's on Montgomery Street." And I thought, that's cool. When I got there, it was this beautiful little cottage and this wonderful garden, and everything was great, except for one thing. I did not have an iron and an ironing board. Now that might not strike you as being important, but you've got to know that when I was a small boy, my grandmother took me aside one day and says, "I'm gonna teach you how to do 3 things. I'm gonna teach you how to cook, I'm gonna teach you how to wash, and I'm gonna teach you how to iron. Because when you grow up, you might meet a no good woman, and I don't want you running around hungry, nasty, or wrinkled up." And you see, when you arrive and you have no iron and no ironing board, it affects your performance. Now, notice also that when Diane Macklin got here, she too lacked an iron and an ironing board. And black folks do not like to go around wrinkled up. In fact, I think Donald Davis might be black, because you never see him wrinkled up. So Diane and I put out the call. You know, we'll be perfectly happy if you can find us an iron and an ironing board. So we got together and we had our little opening, party to meet all of the storytellers. Some of us didn't know each other, most of us did, but we got together, we had a really good time. And in comes Diane. Now, somebody has got the erroneous idea that she is my daughter because I called her daughter. She is not my blood daughter, but there's something that happens in the community when you see a young lady and she's wonderful and talented and gifted and beautiful, you call her daughter because it's like, it's an honorary thing. But my daughter came in and she had an iron and an ironing board. I don't know how they looked all over the city of Ojai to find an iron and an ironing board, but they found it. And not only that, but Diane had a beautiful wardrobe, colorful clothes, all of which were wrinkled. And so she went aside and went into the house and she ironed her clothes and then bestowed upon me the iron and the ironing board. Now, it was not long after that that the party started to break up, and Brian Bimmel, who was not only my manager and my promoter and the guy who signs the check, but also my chauffeur, my bodyguard, and my ace sidekick, said, I'm gonna take you back to the cottage. I said, okay. Now, if you've ever tried to follow Brian, you know he drives extremely fast. It's like if you try to find him, it's like, he's already gone. He passed the house 2 or 3 times. Before he knew it, just... And finally, he realized where the house was, and he let me out, and I proceeded to say, bye, Brian. Before I could get bye, Brian out, he was gone. Ojai is very dark at night. I come from Detroit. We got something called street lights. Not in Ojai. And there I was on Montgomery Street, not remembering what the front of the house looked like. And as it became even darker, I started to feel along the edge of the fence, of the gate, trying to find the opening so that I could get back to the cottage. And as I was feeling in the dark, looking around, I opened the gate and I went into the backyard. And lo and behold, there was no cottage. Well, it seemed that in the darkness, not being familiar with the house, I had stepped into the wrong yard. And as the place that I'm staying at had no people in it, they like loaned it to us while they were out of town, I looked over and there was a white man, a tall white man, making himself a cup of coffee, and I was in his backyard. My heart started beating, and I started thinking about all the ways that this could go wrong. And I remember on my hip is not only a pocket computer, but is a flashlight. Thank you, iPhone. I turned on the flashlight, but then I thought, wait a minute, this guy is gonna try to figure out why there's a black man in his backyard with a flashlight. So then I deadened the flashlight, but I saw just enough to realize that I was in the house next door. And I ninja'd my way out of the gate and went over to the proper house and went, whew. Now here comes the scary part. As I was sleeping that night, I had a dream of a newscast that went something like this. Prominent black storyteller, Robert Jones, was found shot to death in Ojai on Montgomery Street. They believe that Jones, who hails from Detroit, was perhaps attempting a burglary, but was caught by the homeowner, who subsequently shot him 17 times. Police in Ventura County Sheriff's Department still are theorizing as to why Jones, age 65, had an iron and a full-length ironing board. Details at 11. Whew, that's scary, man. Now, because sometimes you can just find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so there's a song done by a great songwriter named Tom Russell that I learned years ago because I knew in my spirit I would be here tonight. Two men rode up from the south one rainy autumn night, the sky above, in the mud below. They stepped into the deacon's bar. They was Mexican by sight, the sky above and the mud below. They threw a horsehair bridle down, said we'll trade this for whiskey rounds. The deacon slammed the bottle down, they began to drink it. Well, their hair was long and shiny black, tied up behind their ears, the sky above and the mud below. Their faces were identical, like a man before a mirror, the sky above and the mud below. Well, someone whispered that beats all, they wanted posters on the wall. Twin brothers, name of Sandoval, horse thieves from Okias. Well, the bridle and the belts they wore were braided gray and black, the sky above and the mud below. The color of a roan horse once belonged to Deacon Black, the sky above and the mud below. Was the fastest horse for miles around, stolen from the old fairgrounds. A month ago outside of town, we tracked but never found him. Now the deacon was a preacher who had fallen hard from grace, the sky above and the mud below. He owned a bar and a string of quarter horses that he'd race, the sky above and the mud below. Now the deacon, he could drink and curse, but still he quoted sacred verse. He was sheriff, judge, and he owned a hearse, a man you did not anger. One brother, he spoke English, so deacon quiet as to their word, the sky above and the mud below. Said, mister, we braid horsehair in the bridles, ropes, and quirts, the sky above and the mud below. Said, this fine bridle I did make from a roan horse killed by leg bone break. Horsehair rope, horse meat steak, we cleaned him to the bone. Oh, the sky above, the mud below, the wind, the rain, the sleet and snow. Horse thieves up from Mexico, drinking hard and singing. Well, the brothers, they were ignorant or didn't know just where they were, the sky above and the mud below. Well, the deacon's face grew darker as he measured every word, the sky above and the mud below. Say, you horsehair-braiding sons of, you stole my claim to earthly riches. Someone go and dig a ditch, there may well be a hanging. One brother reached inside his shirt, feeling for his gun, the sky above and the mud below. Too late for Deke had whipped around his sawed-off Remington, the sky above and the mud below. Old Testament, it says somewhere, an eye for eye and hair for hair. Covet not thy neighbor's mare, I believe it's Revelation. The trial commenced and ended quick. They never had a hope, the sky above and the mud below. Says, boys, we'll cut your hair now. You can braid yourselves a rope, the sky above and the mud below. Like I said, the Old Testament, it says somewhere, an eye for eye and hair for hair. Covet not thy neighbor's mare, I believe it's Revelation. Now the fancy horsehair bridle hangs up on the deacon's wall, the sky above and the mud below. Next to the wanted poster of the brothers Sandoval, the sky above and the mud below. And the twisted rope so shiny black, the artifact that broke their necks. The craftsmanship he did respect, they should have stuck to braid. Oh, the sky above, the mud below, the wind, the rain, the sleet and snow, the deacon's hearse a rolling slow in the first blue light of the morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very sad announcement. Bill Harley is our next performer, but I can't find him anywhere. Oh, Bill. Oh, Bill. Oh, Bill.
Boo!
Oh!
Okay, I was really stupid.
This was one of our smarter ideas backstage. Welcome, Bill Harley.
I'd just like to apologize because it was mostly my fault. Robert doesn't remember this actually, but I met him and his grandmother, and I remember her looking at me and going, Robert, I need to teach you something about ironing. Don't forget it. I want to tell you a story I learned from Richard Walker. Richard Walker was a storyteller from England, and he died a number of years ago. And I got this story from him. Willie McPhee was the finest of pipers. And every place he went, the doors opened for him, and he would play for a hot meal and a warm bed to sleep in. And after years and years of practicing his trade in Scotland, he decided he wanted to take a tour of the whole island. And so he packed his little Uilleann pipes, one underneath you put underneath your arms, and the great war pipes that would scare anyone. And he packed them all up with his little kit bag of tools, and he headed off down out of the highlands, through the lowlands, into England, through Newcastle on Tyne, traveling all the way down through East Anglia. He walked through the streets of London, and everywhere he went, he said, "My name is Willie McPhee, and for a hot meal and a warm bed to sleep, I'll play for the pleasure of you and your company." And everywhere he went, the doors opened, all the way down to Plymouth, to Land's End, up through Bristol, and then into Wales. And finally, he knew it was time to head home. But the weather had turned. And by the time he got to Selkirk and into York, which is known for its hospitality, and you have to consider that this is a Scottish story and interpret that any way you want. The weather had turned, and one night he found himself on a lonely road, far from any town, far from any city, and the clouds lowered, and it began to snow. Now, people had opened their doors for him, and they had fed him and gave him a place to sleep. But the fact is, it happens with many itinerant performers, he didn't have much to show for it. His returning home as poor as he had been when he started. Only the richness of the people who loved his music was what he carried. But as a result, there were holes in his elbows of his jackets, the knees of his pants, and worst of all, his shoes. The lowers had separated from the uppers, and as he walked and the snow began to build up, his shoes opened and closed and opened and closed. Soon his socks were wet, and he was truly miserable, wading through the snow on the road, in the dark, in the night, in the country, wondering what was going to become of him. Well, finally, with the snow about 6 or 8 inches deep, he came upon something that looked just like a log in the middle of the road. And even though he was hungry and cold and tired, he was a kind man. He said, "Some horse might be traveling down this road, some carriage might be coming, I'd better move it out of the way." And he went to kick it, and much to his horror, he saw it was not a log at all, but a body. And he said, "The poor bastard. He's had one too many drinks, and he's fallen asleep here, and he's frozen to death." There was nothing he could do. He was far from home. He couldn't carry him anyway. But he thought the least he could do was push him off the road so no one would roll over him. So he managed to shove him off the road. By that time he'd done that, the snow had come off the body. And he looked down, and he couldn't help but let his eyes rest upon the man's boots. Because they looked to be brand new. And they looked to be the finest leather. And he said, that poor fellow with those fine boots going to waste. And he couldn't help himself. Maybe it was because he was so cold and hungry, and there was a little bit of desperation. He said, I'll just take his boots. I'll give him mine in their place. He'll never notice. So there by the side of the road with the snow coming down deeper and deeper, he knelt down and he undid the laces on the boots. But wouldn't you know, that poor fellow had been out there so long, the boots were frozen to the man's legs. The harder he tried, the more desperate he came. He said, I've got to get those boots. What can I do? And then a horrible thought crossed his mind, because he had a little tool bag to fix his pipes. And the truth was, in that tool bag was a little saw. You never know what you might do if you're desperate. It could happen to you too. So he did. Right there with the snow coming down and the wind howling. He took out that little saw, he opened it up, and he cut that man's legs off right above the boots. And then he tied those laces together and he hung them over his shoulder. And he said, at least when I warm up, I'll have a pair of boots to wear. But still, he walked down the road, headed down the road, the snow building up in the roads and the hills all around him. And he didn't know what he was going to do that night. He said, even with these new boots, I might die. But then far off in the distance, up on a hill, he thought he saw a light. And hope came back into his heart. And he pushed on the road until he saw it was a small farm, a croft high up in a hill. He said, Willie McPhee, luck is with you tonight. So he waded through the snow, and he came up to this little croft, and he saw that the light was on. He said, I think I'll take a look inside. So he waded up, and he peered in the little window, and his heart opened up, because there was a man and a woman sitting down at a table with the fire roaring and the hearth, and there was a pot of stew in front of each of them, the steam rising up, and even more to make him more excited, there sitting by the man's side was a brand new bottle of single malt scotch, and I'm sure it was Talisker, because that's my favorite kind, in case you're wondering what you might give me. So with his heart filled with hope, he pounded on the door, and he heard the man grumble, and the door opened up. He said, my name's Willie McPhee. I'm the finest of pipers. For a hot dinner, a warm place to stay, I'll be happy to play for you. And the man looked at him and said, get lost. Shut the door. Willie couldn't believe it. The snow's coming down. There must be some mistake. He knocks on the door again. The man's there. You're still here. He said, my name's Willie McPhee. I'm the finest of papers. For a hot meal and a warm bed, I'll play for you. The man said, I hate the pipes. Shut the door. What was Willie McPhee going to do? He was going to die out here. He didn't care if the man liked the pipes or not. He beat again. The man opened the door. He said, you're still here. He said, what are you doing, Phil? I need a place to stay. Surely you let me stay in the house. And the man said, there's no room for you here. He said, I'm going to die out there. He said, if you want to, you can go back and sleep in the barn with the cow. He said, I'm starving. He said, maybe my wife will bring a plate for a dinner before after you're done. Now get lost. Shuts the door. There was Yorkshire hospitality. There was nothing for him to do but to wade around the house through the snow until he came to the barn. He had to pull and pull on that barn door just to get it open because of the snow. And he came into the barn, and it was a big empty space. And over in the corner, sleeping on the hay, was the milk cow. It was all curled up and was sleeping, but it was chewing and chewing and chewing on its cud. It was cold in the barn, warmer than outside. But he took those boots off and he looked at that cow, and the steam was rising up off the cow from the heat it was putting out, and he got an idea. So he took those boots with the poor man's legs inside, and he stuck them under the cow. Then he leaned up against the side of the barn, and he fell asleep, but only for 5 or 6 minutes. And he woke up, and he saw the steam rising up off the cow. And he said, I wonder if they're warmed up, if they've thawed out. So he pulled them out from underneath the cow, And in fact, they had thawed. So he pulled that man's legs out, or what was left of the legs, and wouldn't you know, he put those boots on and they fit like a glove. And the leather was soft as butter, and he laced it up. He said, "Willie McPhee, this is a fine thing." And he looked at that poor fellow's legs, and he looked so naked. He said, "Well, what do you know? I'll just give him my boots." So he put the boots on the poor man's legs. And he sat there in the hay, looking at his new boots and the man's legs and his old boots. And he looked over at Bessie, chewing its cud. And he got an idea. A smile came over his face. He took those two legs with his old boots, the uppers and lowers separated, and he stuck them inside the cow's mouth. And the cow kept chewing. And then Willie McPhee climbed up into the loft and covered himself over with hay and waited. And it wasn't more than 5 or 10 minutes later, he heard somebody wading through the snow. And the door opened, and a woman's voice called out, "I don't know where you are, but I brought something for you." She came in holding a lantern. "Where are you? Where did you go? Are you still here?" And her eyes came to rest on Bessie, chewing on these legs. And she said, "Oh my God, oh my God." She ran out of the barn going, "John, John, come quick, come quick. The cow's eating the piper." He came blasting out of the house. He said, "What's wrong with you, woman? Come out here, look, come, come, come." He came in, she said, "Look." He said, "Oh my God. If they find out, they'll kill us. What are we going to do?" She said, "We've got to do something." He said, "We'll just have to bury what's left of him." So they took those legs out with Willie McPhee's old boots, and they waded in the snow down halfway out into the pasture with a shovel. They dug a hole there, and they buried what was left of that man, those two poor legs in Willie McPhee's old boots, and they covered him over, and they went back in to bed. And Willie got an idea. He waited another 10 minutes. And he picked up his old war pipes. And he waded out into the snow until he came to the place where they had buried that poor fella's legs. And he put his pipes together and he put it over his shoulder and he began to blow into it, and then he let rip. And he played and played. Those pipes were so loud. And as he played, the snow came down and covered him until he was completely covered in white. And some people say that was Willie McPhee's finest concert. Well, it wasn't too long as he played, he saw the door open, the light poured out from inside. And that woman and the man, they came out and they saw him. They said, "It's the ghost of the piper." 2 minutes later, they had taken whatever they could carry in their bags and they ran down the road, and they were never seen again in this story. Willie finished his concert. He packed up his pipes and he walked into the house, and the hearth was warm and the stew in the bowls was still warm. And he poured a tumbler of Talisker and he went over and sat by the fire. And he said, "Willie McPhee, indeed tonight you're a lucky man." And just as he said that and took a sip of the single malt, there was a pounding on the door. And he said, "Who could be out on a night like tonight?" And he opened the door and there was a wee little man. And he said, "You poor fella, come on here, take your boots off and roast off your shins by the fire." And the man said, "Yeah. Well, there's a problem with that." And that's the story of how the cow ate the piper. Good night, you all. Take care.
We're going to take a short intermission, and after which we'll do the raffle drawings for tonight. And so it's not too late to buy your raffle, because remember, if you do, all your dreams will come true. So the lights will come up, and we'll see you at 7 o'clock. Okay? We'll start the story again. Thank you.
Reggie. Come on.
It's gonna be me. Oh my God, you're right. I know. Robert Porter won, but he says a note on the bottom is, please give my gift to Reggie Carpenter. Robert, I couldn't accept it. No, it's all yours, darling. Are you here? Robert Porter? Mr. Porter? Porterhouse Steak? No. Oh, sure.
By the way, 1 year, true story, my sister actually won the main prize.
Okay, the next prize is a swag bag. We have one of our nice storytelling bags designed by Callie McSaylor. She also designed our poster and our brochure and all the artwork on that, along with Andy Gilman, who put some other stuff in it and sent it out. Next, we have a bunch of CDs from this year's and last year's. We called the 2 years ago last year because, you know, a couple of books, some t-shirt, a hat, and an apron, and the winner is...
The woman holding the bag is going to be Brian, it's be a man, Brian Merrill. Brian Merrill, are you here? Brian, run down like the price is right. Brian, come, yes. He's everybody's best friend. Thank you, Brian.
The next prize is 2 tickets for next year's Thursday night show. It's a surprise. We can't say what it is yet. And a 1-night stay at the Sunito Hotel.
Ooh. Ruth Ann Rossman. Ruth Ann, are you here?
2 people were sitting there.
Oh, the whole family. Oh. Ruth Ann, I'm wondering if you could do an interpretive dance on your way down. Oh my gosh, look at that
Nope, sitting
technique.
over here, right? No, 2 people were there, but I think they're coming back.
Got the gift?
They look very dissimilar, but
I'm a lot fatter.
No, he said these are taken. Right?
no, they're okay.
We were just kidding with that gift. Okay, Brian, ready?
The next prize is the grand prize. Drum roll, please. Everybody, drum roll. 2 festival passes for next year, 2 Naughty Tale tickets, all the workshops you want to go to. Everything at the festival. Let's see who it is.
It's Reggie Carpenter. I'm so happy. Bernadette Di Pietro. Bernadette, are you here? No, that's anticlimactic.
I know who she, I know.
Oh, good one. But Brian knows her, so he'll give that to her. Well, in absentia, let's hear it for Bernadette. And don't forget that, Brian, is the silent raffle still going on?
Why, yes, Reggie, it is.
And hey, have you got your tickets for Naughty Tales? Yeah. I hope so. Okay, so on with the show? Let's do it. Okay.
Can you hear me? And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage our dear friend, Donald Davis.
I couldn't hear my name. When I was a little kid growing up, I had two best friends, David and Bill. We did everything together, always. They half the time lived at our house because my friends David and Bill, they were both orphans. David lived with his grandmother. Bill lived with his older half-sister, which meant that my mother thought they were her children as well. So they were always hanging out at our house. Every time Halloween would come, though, we were stuck because I had a little brother. And my mother would force the three of us to all take my little brother trick-or-treating. It was miserable. Well, eventually we turned 16, and the three of us said to my mother, this year we can drive. This year we're not going to take Joe trick-or-treating. He's old enough, he can go on his own, he can go by himself. We're going to drive because we can do all kinds of things driving that we could never do if we had to walk everywhere. And finally, my mother gave in, and she agreed we didn't have to take my brother, and we could actually use her car. Now, we were going to do something special for Halloween, but we had no idea what we were going to do because, see, we were 16 years old. And you understand, if you're a 16-year-old boy and you're operating alone, you have some sense. But if you get together with another 16-year-old boy, all of a sudden both of you have lost half your sense. And if you had a third 16-year-old boy, you're just walking down Stupid Street. So we knew we wanted to do something, but what it was going to be, we had no idea. But we were going to make some money so it would be good. My daddy was the treasurer of the Lions Club Horse Show. And in town, the horse show grounds had a big barn where all through the course of the year, people boarded riding horses. And every time we wanted to make a little bit of money, we would say to my daddy, do you think the horse barn needs to be cleaned out? He'd say, it sure does, boys. It hadn't been done for 3 months. I'll pay you $25 from the Lions Club if you clean out the horse barn. And we would borrow David's Uncle Don's pickup truck. We would go over there. We would load manure up in the pickup truck, load it up in the pickup truck, load it up in the pickup truck. We get $25 for cleaning out the horse barn, but that wasn't all the money because, see, when we got through, we could take that truckload of manure to Clyde Ray's flower shop, and he would pay us $10 more to dump it in his huge compost pit behind the flower shop. So we'd load up the truck with manure, and then David would drive, and I'd sit in the front, and Bill would sit on top of the manure in the back of the truck, holding the pitchfork like he was Poseidon. And we'd drive slowly up Main Street, and Bill would wave to people along the street, and wave to people along the street, and once in a while he would pick up a little hard piece of horse manure, and he would toss it towards someone, and they would reach out and grab it because they had no idea what it was coming through the air. It was a great trip all the way up the street. And when we got to Clyde Ray's flower shop, in those days, you couldn't import flowers from everywhere, so he had 2 huge greenhouses, and in the back, about half the size of this stage, made of concrete blocks. Ground level at the top, drop down, ground level at the bottom. An enormous compost pit. Everything went in there, and we dumped the whole truckload of horse manure in there and got an extra $10. We now had $35 to plan with. Well, on the way home that day, we were driving behind Mr. Wesley Turner's clothing store, and Mr. Turner was carrying an old mannequin out the back door to throw it in the dumpster. And Bill said, "We need that." And David said, "What for?" Bill said, "We don't know yet, but we're going to need it." So we got the mannequin out of the dumpster and then put our 1/3 of a brain each, 16-year-old minds together to come up with a plan for Halloween. And here's what we did. We went back to Mr. Turner's store and we bought 2 identical red plaid flannel shirts. One for Bill, one for the mannequin. Bill had bushy black hair. We went to the thrift shop and bought a wig that looked like Bill's hair. We didn't need to buy blue jeans. We had plenty of those. Put one on Bill, one on the mannequin. They now looked reasonably in the dark, just alike. Then we put an eye bolt in the top of the mannequin's head through the wig so that we could fasten a little cable to the eye bolt, run it over the limb of a tree, and swing the mannequin out in the road in the dark. Remember, we're 16-year-olds with 1/3 of a brain each. You just got to understand that over and over again. And the plan was on Halloween night, both Bill and the mannequin would have trick-or-treat bags so they would look alike, but Bill would have ketchup all over him. And he would hide behind a little bush across the hill from where we'd gone to Clyde Ray's flower shop, across the cemetery hill. And as a car came up that hill, when the car came to just the right place, all of a sudden, we'd swing the mannequin out in the road in front of the car. And the car would hit the mannequin, we would jerk it back instantly, and Bill would roll dead out into the road. 16-year-old boys, what did you expect? And Halloween night came and we went up in the dark and we got everything all ready. Bill was all ketchuped up. He was hiding behind the bush down there beside the road. The cemetery was up behind us. The mannequin was pulled back. We had another cord fastened it so we could yank it back in a hurry. And here came car lights up over the hill. It came closer and closer and closer and closer, and just at the right time, we let the mannequin loose and it went swinging out in the road. This Pontiac hit it. It went boing like that. We yanked it back. Bill rolled out in the road, and a woman jumped out of the car screaming, "I hit a child! I hit a child!" It was P.A. Donahoe's mama. We knew who it was right then. And she went running to the Russell's house, the nearest house in sight, so she could call for help. And as soon as she went running, the dead boy got up out of the street and came back up in the woods with us, and we sat up there and watched till the police got there. And they looked everywhere, in the ditches, behind the bushes, everywhere. They couldn't find where a dead boy had crawled off anywhere. And then one of the policemen reached down and put his finger in the blood and smelled it and then tasted it. And then they stood there and started laughing and tried to explain to Miss Donahoe that she hadn't killed the boy. It wasn't blood, it was ketchup all over the road. And we were hiding, laughing our heads off. Well, they all left and we got ready to do it again, but we decided we better move to a different place. So we went across the hill through the cemetery, right across the street from Clyde Ray's flower shop. There were big trees there. We hooked our mannequin up across a new limb. We got a good new hiding place. We put more ketchup on Bill, and we were ready. We pulled the mannequin back. Here came car lights. Actually, the lights were close together, so we knew it was a Jeep. And it got closer and closer and closer, and right at the proper moment, we let loose. The mannequin went swinging out in the road. The Jeep hit the mannequin. Bam! We yanked it back. Bill rolled out in the road, and in that moment, we realized the Jeep was being driven by our old 8th grade teacher, Roy Haupt. A man not to be messed with. In absolutely no hurry, he got out of the Jeep. walked around to the front and looked at Bill stretched out there in the road. And in a loud voice he says, "My goodness, looks like I ran over Bill McInville. I wonder if he's all the way dead." And he reached out his foot and punched Bill a little bit and said, "I don't believe he's all the way dead. I better back up and run over him a few more times." And all of a sudden, Bill came to life and took off running full speed back through the cemetery. And we came out of the trees there where Mr. Haupt was, and the three of us stood there and we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed our heads off, because this was actually funnier than anything we could have come up with. And then Mr. Haupt drove on to go back home, and we started looking for Bill. We couldn't find him. We looked up and down the roadsides. We looked up in the cemetery. We looked everywhere we could. We simply could not find Bill. We got in my mother's car. We rode around. We rode through the cemetery. We rode around. We rode up and down the streets. Bill, we thought, he must have just gone home. The plan was everybody was going to spend the night at my house, but now we lost Bill. So David and I went home out to my house and we spent the night. My mother said, "I thought Bill was coming with you." We said, "Well, we did too, but I guess he went home." And being 16 years old, we didn't worry about him one bit. Next morning was a Sunday morning. We got up and my mother was fixing breakfast for us, and the telephone rang. My dad answered the phone, and all of a sudden he said, "Yeah, Clyde, this is Joe." It was Clyde Ray from the flower shop. He wasn't open on Sunday morning, but you see, he fixed the flower arrangements for the three main churches in town, and so he had to go by the flower shop while the right people came to pick them up to take them to church. My daddy started laughing and laughing. He said, "Yeah, we'll come and get him, we'll come and get him." And he hung up the phone and turned around and he said, "Boys, did you all lose Bill?" We said, "Yeah, he disappeared last night and we never could find him. We thought he went on home." My daddy said, "He didn't go home." That was Clyde Ray from the flower shop. He said he got up there this morning to get all the church flowers out, and he heard somebody hollering and hollering and hollering, and he went around in the back, and down in this great big old compost pit, wallowing around in horse manure, was Bill McInville. When he had run off that night in the dark, he had run right through there and fallen into the very compost pit we had dumped all the horse manure in. Clyde said he had ketchup all over him, and now he's got ketchup and horse manure all over him. And he asked me to call you because he said that's where he's actually supposed to be. And we got my daddy's car, and we opened the trunk lid and put a tarp in the trunk. And we went up there and got Bill, put him in the trunk, brought him back home, and he took his clothes off outside. My mother wouldn't let him come in the house to take his clothes off. And we survived Halloween. The next year, my mother said, "Well, boys, what are you going to do this year?" We said, "Well, we've got really a nice idea. You know, since we can drive, if we take my little brother Joe trick-or-treating, we can take him a lot more places." And that's what we did.
He's the master. Okay, I've got a guessing game for you. Who am I? Anne Boleyn. We're bringing this ship home with Mr. Bill Lepp. Give me a hand.
Good evening. I don't know if you noticed, hopefully you didn't, but this program is titled something like Mysterious and Suspenseful Stories, and I don't tell mysterious and suspenseful stories, so that's going to be the mystery and the suspense, is when is this story going to get mysterious and suspenseful, or I can tell it in this voice, and that would be scary. So let me just start this way. It was Halloween night on this very spot, and there was a murder. Okay, so now it's mysterious and suspenseful. I travel all around the country, and I have the fortune of traveling with all of these people all over the country, and we get ourselves in some strange situations. And it turns out that, I've been in this business for about 20 years now, and it turns out that a lot of times wherever you're going, they'll send you like a piece of paper or several pieces of paper, and in that it explains what you're supposed to do over the course of the weekend while you're there, and then you sign it at the bottom. And it says like contract at the top. And I usually read that top line and then where I sign it. So a lot of times I get places I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so I got this one place, and it was me. Now, the four of us are pastors. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm a Methodist pastor, or former. Donald Davis is a former Methodist pastor. The Reverend Robert Jones is a current Baptist pastor. And Kimmy is a pastor in some church that somebody made up. And so the four of us got hired to do like this pastoral storytelling thing. And again, I hadn't really read the contract, so when we got there, instead of putting us in hotels or nice residential places like they do at the Ojai Storytelling Festival, it was a camp, a youth camp, and so the four of us, besides being storytellers, also had to be camp counselors and live in a cabin. So there was this really long cabin. It was like, maybe as long as this stage, maybe even longer. So you walk in the front door, and there was a little hallway, and then on either side there was a wing. And on each side there was probably 25 bunk beds. And that's where the kids slept. And then you went through a door, and there was an area that was not much bigger than this carpet that I'm standing on. And that's where the four of us, me, Donald, Kimmy, and the Reverend Robert Jones, were going to bunk throughout the course of the week. So there was a door, and then on this side there was a bunk bed, and the Reverend Robert Jones was on the bottom bunk over here, and I was on the top bunk. And then the Reverend Donald Davis was on the bottom bunk over here, and then the Reverend Kimmy Whitecamp was on the top bunk over here. And then, so aside from doing camp stuff, we also had to pay attention to the children at night. And then there was a door in the back so that the four of us could come in and out of the cabin without bothering any of the kids. Well, we were doing this carving thing. We were learning how to carve animals, and Donald figured out that he could carve his finger. And he carved it so well that we had to take him to the doctor. Now this was kind of far away, and we took him to the doctor, and they put him in they put him in some stitches, and then they put him on painkillers. And me and the Reverend Robert Jones were helping Donald up the back stairs into that little cabin. Ooh, this is suspenseful. We were helping him up the back stairs into the cabin. Well, we weren't really helping him because the stairs were uneven, and Donald was on painkillers. And it was fun to watch him try and negotiate those stairs. Well, he fell and had just enough sense to know that this hand was damaged, so he put it behind his back and stretched this hand out to catch himself. And when he did, these two fingers hit first. I know. And they bent all the way back to his... I know. It's neat to see happen. To someone else. And... because you're like, ooh, can the human body do that? And then you're like, oh, not successfully. And so we had to take him back to the doctor, and they put him in a little, not a sling, but whatever you call that, a scary thing. And so then he was really wiped out. So we helped him up the stairs because it was almost supper. And we got him in bed, and he was conked out. And me and Kimmy and the Reverend Robert Jones took the kids to supper and did the after-supper activities, got the kids in bed, got in our bunks ourselves. And I don't know how long we'd been asleep. Now, we were, four pastors, so they'd led us in prayer. And Reverend Robert Jones had led us in prayer, and he started like, "Dear Lord," and I'm a Methodist, right? And he's the Baptist. He's like, "Dear Lord," and I was like, "Man, this prayer is taking a long time." And then I fell asleep sometime during the prayer, and I don't know exactly how long I'd been asleep when the good Reverend Robert Jones underneath me, he's kind of whispering, and he's going, "Bill, Bill, wake up, but don't move." Now, I don't know if you've ever been woken up in that fashion. But I can tell you several things. One, it's very mysterious and suspenseful. And two, if I keep saying it enough, you'll believe it. And two, it's a very difficult way to be awoken, right? Because if somebody says, "Wake up, but don't move," several things go through your brain. First of all, you know that you're probably about to die. And so your body fills with adrenaline, and you want to go, "Wah!" But you know if you go, "Wah!" you're going to die. So I very slowly brought myself to consciousness, and I said, "What's the problem?" And Reverend Jones said, "I think there's a skunk in the cabin." And I looked over the edge of the bed, and sure enough, there was a skunk milling around. And I said, "How did it get in here?" And as if to answer that question, the screen door went, "Eh," and a second skunk came in the cabin. So now there were two skunks milling around. And the Reverend and I, we were perplexed, but not, terribly worried. I mean, I'm from rural West Virginia, so I wasn't terribly worried. He's from Detroit, so he wasn't worried about two skunks in his house, And so, but then, somewhere in this process, Kimmy had awoken. Now, Kimmy, I don't know how much of the weekend you've been here for, but Kimmy likes to put on this persona, like she's from rural Pennsylvania, someplace called like Pissnoggle or something like that. And then she's all country farm girl, I got dogs that lick me. And no, Kimmy lives in a penthouse on Lower Manhattan. I mean, like her across the street neighbor is Bette Midler or Joan Collins or somebody like that. She's generally wearing like velvet robes, and she just has a helicopter pick her up and take her to wherever she's going. She's never actually touched grass. I mean, that's how it is. She's very urban. And so she woke up and she said, "Is there a skunk in the cabin?" And the Reverend Robert Jones said, "Yes." And Kimmy said, because at this point in the story, if I hadn't messed it up, there'd only be one skunk in the cabin. It's mysterious how the other one got there. And so, let's just pretend there's only one skunk in the cabin. And then there'll be suspense as to whether there'll be another one later on. So, Kimmy said, "Is there's a skunk in the cabin?" Because there was only one. And the Reverend Robert Jones said, "Yes." And Kimmy said, "Will it bite?" Which is the wrong question. Right? If a mountain lion walks into your cabin, you don't think, "Oh, is it going to smell?" If a bear comes in your cabin, you're not thinking, "Oh, I might get a tick." Right? That's not the right course of thinking. But Reverend Robin Jones said, yes, it will bite. And Kimmy said, "Well, I'll be okay, because I'm on the top bunk." And the Reverend Robert Jones said, "Don't you know why people call skunks polecats?" And so Kimmy kind of went, "Oh," kind of one of those noises. And Robert and I, by this time, were giggling, just a little bit. Because we didn't want to, get the skunk excited. So we were over there laughing, like you do. Like when you're in school or at church or, at a funeral. Just a little bit. Donald's passed out. Kimmy's, getting more nervous. That's when the door opened up, and lo and behold,
a second skunk that you didn't know anything about mysteriously came in the cabin. So now there were 2 skunks milling around. Isn't that something? And Kimmy said, if one of them bites me, will the other. And I thought, what do they have, a collective conscience? You know, what are they? The Borg? And, thank you, that's my joke for the nerds. My wife was like, why did you even say that joke? And I'm like, because there's always one person who gets it. And so Kimmy said, if one of them bites me, will the other? And the Reverend Robert Jones said, yes. He said, they're like wasps. And if you make one mad, you make them all mad. And so now I was really laughing. There were tears, you know, going into my ears. And same thing with the Reverend Robert Jones there. Bed was quaking, you know, like a 1.4 on the Richter scale. Kimmy was freaking out. Donald was passed out. And after a minute, the Reverend Robert Jones got a hold of himself. And he said, Bill, did you brush your teeth? And I thought he knew where he was going with this, so I said, no. And Kimmy said, I brushed my teeth. Why is that important? And the Reverend Robert Jones said, because skunks are scavengers. They're like bears. If they smell a scent that they're attracted to, they're going to investigate it. And so Kimmy inhaled, like she never intended to exhale again. Not like she was trying to kill herself, just like she wasn't going to breathe for the next 20 years. She just sort of went, like that, right? And the screen door went, and a third skunk, which you had not expected, came into the cabin. So now there's 3 skunks milling around. By this time, Robert and I are just about losing it. Kimmy is up there trying not to breathe. And Donald, who's been asleep this whole time, now Donald, you know Donald, he's a wonderful guy. He knows everything. And he's a perfect camp counselor because he's one of those people that likes to get up early and he's happy about it and he knows a song to get going in the morning. Like he wakes up every morning, he's like, good morning, and he jumps out of bed with his bow tie. That's it, but that's it. There he is. And he's singing a song about happy trees and little birdies going chirpity chirp chirp chirp. And so Donald, in the midst of all this, wakes up. And in his drug-addled state, he assumes it's morning. And so he goes, good morning. And he jumps out of bed. And he landed in the center of a triangle of skunks. And he looked down. And with all the innocence of a drunk, he said, kitty cats. And he knelt down. And he reached down. And he started to scratch one of those skunks behind its ears. And the skunk didn't know what was happening. But it was mysteriously not unpleasant. So it came closer. Donald picked it up. And he turned toward Kimmy. And he said, look, Kimmy, a kitty cat. And the skunk crawled off of Donald's hands. And onto Kimmy's belly. And she sat up. And she screamed. And when she did, the skunk bit her. And then all 3 skunks just went off. And the Reverend Robert Jones and I were laying there in the beds. I mean, I was scared, so I climbed out and went, we were laying there, choking and gagging and laughing, and I heard a voice came off from the ether. It's only going to make sense if you were here last night. And I heard it say, boys, boys, boys. When a man does things purely for his own enjoyment and not for the benefit of others or the glory of God, he will be stained and tainted that others may know.
ends the mystery. Wow, that was a fabulous night, wasn't it? Let's hear it for all the Kellys. We'll see you all at Naughty Tales. It's right over at the Arts Center. And thank you so much for coming. We're really appreciative. Okay, we'll see you in a little bit.
Okay.